Hello, people. I finished the book. Churchill and Orwell, The Fight for Freedom. Uh, the authors sort of tried to compare the two and, towards the end, draw their lives closer and closer together. I think they were fundamentally different people. They lived at the same time. Orwell died much earlier. They were both citizens of England, but that's about it as far as I can tell. I think the big difference that I see in the two is that Orwell could look back at what he had been thinking for the previous 10 years and say, maybe I didn't get that quite right. And Churchill, on the other hand, was an imperialist. I think wherever Churchill had been born, he would have fought for whatever that country needed. If Churchill had been born an Arab in Morocco, he would have been an anti-imperialist. He would have said, "Get the fucking French out of here." Same thing if he would have been born in India, in the Punjab. He would have been, "Get the English out of here." I think Churchill was a nationalist, not so much as we understand it today, but more imperialist type guy. There we go. I ended up, thinking that this book was absurd when I started it, but it was a pretty good little book. Lots of neat little tidbits about both of these guys. Starts out, it was published in 2018, 270 pages. The author's name is Thomas E. Ricks, and apparently this book won some kind of Pulitzer Prize. But I got to go all the way back to page 4 for my first note. And you know what? I'm not even going to read it. They compare Churchill's time fighting for his country to Orwell fighting in Spain. And they're two completely different things. And what I was saying just a second ago about Churchill being an imperialist, he was there in the Boer War, and I consider that to be a very unjust war, and I'm sure that if Orwell had gone there and fought against the Boer, 10 years later Orwell would have said, I was disillusioned, I shouldn't have done that. So we're going to skip that one. Page 63, and this one is just a personal thing of mine. In the second paragraph on page 63, the author feels the need to tell me that RAF means Royal Air Force. And I can't stand being told something that I've known since I was 10 years old. Anybody that doesn't know RAF is an acronym for the Royal Air Force, they're not going to be reading this book anyway. They're going to be like doing a fucking coloring book or something. Orwell leaves Spain. Bottom of 78, top of 79. I can't remember what this is. Oh, this is kind of funny. He leaves Spain and he goes back to England, Orwell, and he tries to live in the English countryside. Back at his village cottage, Orwell wrote and gardened, but did not reopen the shop. He had like a grocery shop for a little while. The vicar of the church, likely suspicious of the politics of this couple just returned from Spain, dropped by for a chat. The churchman doesn't approve at all of our having been on the government side in Spain, Orwell wrote to one of his war comrades. The church was on the side of the rebels in Spain because they supported the church. Of course, we had to own up that it was true about the burning of churches by Republican forces, but he cheered up a lot on hearing they were only Roman Catholic churches. So even, even in the 1940s, vicars in England have this hatred of the Catholics. Charles Lindbergh was a fascist. He was a big supporter of Adolf Hitler. Lindbergh was a weird guy. He was a weird guy in a weird time. Bottom of 162, top of 163. And my note there says, American servicemen stationed in England. One of the great parts about this book is it goes into how English people felt about the Americans, how the English aristocracy felt about the Americans, and how English politicians like Churchill felt about the Americans. And in the early part of the war, they did not like the Americans. Towards the end, they grudgingly accepted the Americans. Churchill was extremely saddened after he realized that the Americans were going to replace the British and that the time of the English Empire was pretty much over. Let's see, what is that? 62, 163. Of course, I'm condensing that. There is a lot more to it than that. Harvey, an advisor to Anthony Eden, the British foreign minister for most of World War II, was not just being a snob. He was appalled by America's racism and disliked the U.S. military's insistence on following American rules of segregation while posted to England. It is rather a scandal that the Americans should thus export their internal problem. We don't want to see lynching begin in England. I can't bear the typical Southern attitude towards the Negroes. It is a great ulcer on the American civilization and makes nonsense of half their claims. This, of course, had been a theme of British Tories for more than a century, going back to the writer Samuel Johnson's piercing question about American revolutionaries. How is it that we hear the loudest yelps for liberty among the drivers of Negroes? And of course, we're still struggling with that. Orwell writes an essay called Politics and the English Language. And I took one quote from that, which I really like. Political language is designed to make its lies sound truthful and murder respectable, and to give an appearance of solidarity to pure wind. And also the quote, but you know what? I didn't write down what page that was, so I can't read the quote. To political language, the example that springs to my mind is anybody that calls the American Civil War the War of Northern Aggression. That's political language. We all know that that's not true. We all know who fired the first shots. Second paragraph, page 194, Americans become unpopular in Britain. There's a lot of that in here, all the way to the end of the book. Second paragraph, 194. Likewise, Americans were chafed by Churchill's reluctance to invade France and defeat the Germans directly. As Ralph Ingersoll, then a left-leaning journalist, put it, the cynics felt that from 1942 on, the British were spending Russian lives and American dollars and getting a profitable banker's percentage on both. So what's the hurry? What's the hurry meaning? What's the hurry to invade? Because that's kind of what the British were doing. Everybody was doing that, letting the Russians carry on the war. Second paragraph, page 239. I got this book at one of those Goodwill shops where we're buying a lot of books there. They have, my loyal viewers are going to notice some classics creeping into my normal history books, because these Goodwill shops have a great big classics section, whereas their history section is not so much. Second paragraph, 239. And so, out of office, Churchill drifted away into his indulgences. 2 years after he left the premiership, Evelyn Waugh spotted him in a Monte Carlo restaurant, gorging vast quantities of rich food. The novelist unkindly described the old man's face in a letter to Ian Fleming's wife as elephant gray and quite expressionless. During the same Monte Carlo trip, Churchill, while waiting outside the casino for his car, was buttonholed by Frank Sinatra, the American singer, who rushed up to him and shook his hand, saying, "I've wanted to do that for 20 years. After the singer departed, a puzzled Churchill inquired of an assistant, "Who the hell was that?" I thought that was funny as hell. Why would Churchill know who Sinatra was? George Orwell died very early at age 46. He had lung problems his whole life. He continued to smoke, but I think there was something else going on there. It wasn't really the smoking that did it. Of course, me being a smoker, that's what I'm going to think. George Orwell was an anti-Zionist. I didn't see anything in here about him being anti-Jewish. There's a difference there. Unless I've missed something, and somebody may correct me on that, I don't think he was just against Jews, but he was against Zionists, because Zionism, for Orwell, and now that I think about it, I think he's correct, it's just another word for colonialism. They are displacing the Arabs in that area. Whatever you want to say about it, you can't go back to a mythology book and say this is theirs because of that, because that's not a real estate document. That's it. This was a good book. I don't know what I'm going to read next. Little humorous note here. One of the reasons that I picked this book out of the 2 boxes of unread books we have here is this one had large print. So as I'm getting older, the size of the print is becoming more and more important. Thanks for watching.